Hey guys, welcome back to Chris and Retro. Tonight's video, I'm going to talk about the twisting, winding road of the recovery journey, especially if you find yourself in a pinch. You're in a tight spot, you got yourself in a bunch of trouble, and you're trying to get your feet back underneath you as you work on your recovery and your sobriety. But at the same time, you got to navigate maybe a mess you found yourself in. Tonight, I'm going to share some things from our story, our recent story that I've shared in a couple other videos, and some continued baffling behavior that goes on around us. And what I'm hoping to do tonight is educate and provide from our experiences, so it's something that you can help navigate your journey in a less frustrating, fearful, and harming way. So I hope to take our path and what we've learned and how we've stood and advocated for ourselves and give you some tools to help you. With that, we'll get started. So your recovery journey is going to be a twisting, winding, complicated, exhausting road, um, just based on getting better, period. Whatever's brought you there, if it's trauma or heredity or exposure to bad environments or whatever it is that's got you here, um, uh, partying too far and having it turn you too far away, because you start losing things, and then that becomes your medication, whatever it is that gets you there. I mean, for me, alcohol, that's kind of how it worked. Things got a little chaotic in my life. I started finding some release from alcohol, and then it became something I needed all the time. I have addiction tendencies. That's one of them. So when I look at when you're reviewing your journey and what it is you're trying to accomplish, recognize this is no easy fight, and that's why so many people struggle to find better days and find ways to put their feet under the ground. The intention of the show, while I do caution for the slip and the fall and the high risk living and all that other stuff, I really, most of my experience is going to be, how do you get yourself out of these messes to rise? How do you find hope when it seems everything's hopeless? Well, we've experienced a lot here over the last year, myself and Sam, with observations and things that we've seen. And so what we're going to try to do is make sure that our journey continually is investing in your lives, as well as we take that one step forward and we make the moves we need to make. And there's been some things where we made mistakes and some things we've done well. In the end, I think there's some stuff that's happened recently that hopefully is impactful to you. Now, there's a few things I think they're really important. And I think some of it is just framing how your mindset is as you go through this. I'm reading a book. It's called The Science of Stuck by Brett Frank, right here. It was advised to me. I've been reading it. It's actually an excellent book in terms of how you look at things like anxiety, procrastination, depression, all this stuff. And she's got a really refreshing look at all of those things. Excuse me. All of those things. And, ways to think about them that can help you move through those seasons. For example, she talks about procrastination. Well, procrastination is always something that we look at and say, I'm a procrastinator. It's actually one of my 3 triggers for addiction. Procrastination, fear, and controlling behavior are my 3, at least the 3 dominants. Procrastination, you always look at it as like this negative trait. I'm a procrastinator. But if you look at why you do it, it's not because you're a bad person or you're making bad decisions. A lot of times procrastination, while it does yield a lot of negative things, the reason why you're doing it is because you either are ill-prepared to deal with the situation, you're overwhelmed with your circumstances around you, or you're afraid of something, and so you're putting this stuff off. Where procrastination, you start to heal from that, you actually can find victory in getting a lot of these things that you procrastinated that really weren't that big of a mountain, by pulling them apart piece by piece. So you're dealing with much smaller elements versus the entire package of what might be in front of you to face. So I share that with you because mindset is important. And the reason your mindset's important, things like anxiety, the book talks about anxiety. Anxiety, really, we were built as human beings in survival mode. We weren't built for happiness, as this book attests. And I would lean into that's probably a lot true. Our anxiety is really like a check engine light. Anxiety does not attack you, but it does put up these lights that cause us to pause, isolate, whatever it is. And so the book talks about that as well. And I think it's great. All these things are important to know, because when you're in your recovery journey or you're dealing with all kinds of stuff around you as a result, let's say that you found yourself in Child Protective Services hands, or you have legal matters where you're facing jail time, or you have had jail time and you're out on papers, whatever that is, you've got all these other things going on. And by the way, you got to find a way to recover and get better. So I've talked about some advocacy that you have to make for yourself, but it's really starts with, where's your mind? Do you have an objective in mind? And the objective is to have better days, find sobriety, and move beyond your seasons. The one thing you can't do is look at it as an insurmountable situation, because if you ever look at it that way, you will not put the exhausting effort in to find a way out. It is not easy, and it can feel like it's never going to get over. But if you keep taking your next best move and look at it for saying, it may not ever be over for some, but for me, I'm going to go down and fight. I'm going to do everything I possibly can do. And so I'll give you a few things that we've found in our journey that's really important. I've talked about personal advocacy on the show before, but it is incredibly important. Personal advocacy has some elements to it that are so necessary for you to actually advocate well for yourself. And one of those things is do not compromise. Don't compromise. Don't put yourself in a situation where you do just a little bit of this and all of a sudden you get caught and you want everybody to believe that you're not doing it all the time. Let's just say that you're on any kind of medication. Don't overuse your medication. If you repeatedly are running short on your Suboxone, that's a red flag. People are going to start seeing that you're either overusing it or you're copping it for your drug. Don't compromise your scripts. Stay on point with your scripts because it's a red flag. It may be totally innocent, but it's still a red flag. Keep in mind, it's not about whether you're innocent or not once you're in these systems. Innocent until proven guilty is in court. When you're in a post-release, or if you're with CPS or anything like that, it is fraudulent until proven otherwise. They are finding things for you because they don't believe that you're ever okay. They think that it's always just a hustle, and they're going to find a way that shows they're just trying to expose what they believe to be true about you, that you're just a junkie or you're just a drunk or you're just a bad person. They may say otherwise, but the behavior in the system is set up believing that. So to personally advocate for yourself, you got to make sure you're defendable. You know, my mom one time when I was a kid gave me great advice. She would say, honey, I want to believe you, but you don't make yourself defendable. And man, was she right. It was on a lot, much lesser things, but I'd get in trouble and I'd say, Mom, this would happen. You know, it wasn't me this time. And she's like, look, you always tell me the truth. I believe you, but you don't make yourself very defendable. So it's not enough that you're telling the truth, but are you defendable? And you have to look at it from both sides. You can be entirely truthful about what they're alleging against you, but if you don't make yourself defendable and truthful, you're not going to be a good situation. And one of the easiest ways to remain defendable is do every single thing you're supposed to be doing. If you've got a group to go to group. Don't cancel groups. Don't lessen your obligations to your treatment provider. Do more if you can. Be involved in volunteerism. Make sure that you go to your counseling sessions. Make sure that you take your scripts like they're supposed to be. Make sure you show up for the appointment to get your script in the first place, and then don't put your treatment provider through hell trying to reschedule you because you missed your appointment. These are all basics and things that are really, really important that show a recovery mindset and somebody that's on the ball with what they want to try to accomplish. Now, that's just the recovery part. Now you start adding in other constituents that don't really understand really much about addiction. We got an example now, and this is going to be an important one. So I want you to pause for a minute, and I'm going to share some details about it. If you find yourself that you're on any antidepressants, ADHD drugs, even there's a Parkinson's drug, anything along those lines that has anything that would ever show up on a blood screen as amphetamine, word of caution to you guys, heavy word of caution to you guys. If you're in the crosshairs of some of these organizations, if an amphetamine shows up, and many times can show up as methamphetamine too, on the exact same test. Now here's the good and bad of it. Many of these agencies react to the point of care test. They'll respond to the point of care test and say that you're on meth, when in fact you are not. And in fact, you could have never done meth in your life. But if you're on a prescribed medication that has an amphetamine base, it can oftentimes show a positive meth result. And I'll support what I'm claiming now. This will happen more times than not. So it's important, not only are you advocating for yourself, but you're educating those around you, even if they're people that you don't like or involved in punitive measures against you. Here's an article that I just found that I think is really important for this subject matter. So if you are on what medications can cause false positive for methamphetamines? And this is not the same story as poppy seeds make me test positive for drugs or opiates. I don't know if that's true or not. This one I know for sure is true. A false positive test result means that your drug test shows the presence of a medication or substance that you aren't actually taking. So if I scroll down here, any one of these, and a lot of you are probably taking bupropion, all these can trigger a meth result. So if you take something for motion sickness, ear infections, an antidepressant, diabetes medication, blood pressure, weight loss, antipsychotics, ADHD, antihistamine, Parkinson's. These drugs, while they're all for things that are not substance abuse, they're medications that are there to help a wide range of medical conditions. They can all show up positive as methamphetamine on a point of care. Now, I'm not giving you people that use methamphetamine a slick move here so you can say, no, it's not meth, it's these other things. I'm not. What I'm suggesting is that if you do not have a history of using methamphetamine and you find yourself in the crosshairs of a point of care test, especially if you're on papers and it can get you in trouble, or if you're with Child Protective Services and they want to remove you from your children, know your science. So I'm going to give you a basic conversation about this test. I've spent 30 years in lab diagnostics selling the instrumentation, but by osmosis, I've learned a lot about different testing and why, just the basics of why it works. So think of a point of care test as basically a pregnancy test. It's got certain parameters around it and it indicates the potential of pregnancy. It's read certain things with a chemical reaction that says there's some proteins involved here that might indicate that you're pregnant. You can never determine you're pregnant unless your belly starts growing and a baby falls out, unless you actually get a lab test result that's in a core lab or a outpatient lab or wherever the lab is that actually has an instrument that's specifically designed to run an assay that tests for this type of thing. And those are highly specific and highly precise, and they're monitored by scientists, by lab scientists that go to college for this thing and are certified and have to hold that certification through continuing education throughout the year. Highly scrutinized environment, and it's an environment where specialized people know how to have very costly instruments read the result. Now, why am I getting into all that? If a point of care test and you're on one of these medications here shows up as a positive for methamphetamine, it does not mean you're positive for methamphetamine at all. And if you've got a worker that's telling you that's the case, that's nonsense. I'll tell you how to avoid this problem in a second, but recognize this. A cup that you pee in that has a strip in it that reacts to that strip, it tells you you're positive for meth, is nowhere near comparable to $100,000 to $150,000 instrument that takes a sample of your urine. It pulls that sample into you put it into the system. The system then has a reagent reaction to it. Then a light is shined through it called chemiluminescence that enhances the sample so the system can read what that amphetamine actually is. And at that point, that system can tell you any one of these drugs that you have versus it being methamphetamine. That is what should be the determining factor whether any action is taken in your life. Not a cup you peed in that you could probably drink coffee out of too with a little strip in it. Now the strip will give you some directional indication. But there's also, I don't know all the backgrounds of it, but I have to pause and question, if you get a DWI, what do? They give you a breathalyzer test. And then what do they confirm it with? A blood test. They don't even use urine screens for any of that stuff because they understand point of care tests are of limited value. And in many cases are as low as 75% accurate versus systems in a core lab that are as much as 98% accurate. This was not a science test. What I just want to tell you is there's a huge disparity between a point of care test and a lab test. Massive. So how do you avoid it when you've got somebody in the front lines coming to you and saying, you're on papers, why you on meth? And you're like, I'm not on meth. And you're like, well, this says you are. Make sure that you have your script available. Make sure you have copies of any pre-existing urine screens that you've had that show the exact same result, and make sure that you have a copy of a core lab result that matches that. So if I took a urine screen today on January 17th and I was taking one of these medications, and in there it said amphetamine and methamphetamine positive, and then I went to a core lab and the core lab showed amphetamine for any one of these, and half of them I can't even pronounce. I don't even know. Incidentally, I'm not on any of these medications, so it's hard for me to remember them. But anyway, that test shows that I'm actually on the drug that I'm claiming. So you got your script, you've got a history of this exact same result, and you will have that present should the point of care test come back through, especially if you don't have a history of taking methamphetamine anyway. Now, if you have a history of methamphetamine and you have a history of your core lab showing that you're positive for meth, at that point, a positive urine screen for meth could get you in a lot of trouble because the history and the context doesn't demonstrate it well. This section of the video is about personal advocacy. I know it's a pain in the butt, but your addiction got you in the crosshairs, or misgivings got you on papers, or whatever it is that happened with children involved got you with CPS. Your behavior and your actions got you there. So if your behavior and your actions got you there, it's going to be your behavior and your actions that are going to get you out of there. And some of those things are managing people that don't understand everything that you have to understand. So if you're going to have frequent urine screens and you have something that would suspect be on there, like a methamphetamine versus amphetamine, and both of them show up positive, please make sure that you show a history of core lab results and a history of point of care results, and that are of the exact same date and time frame, so that you can have a comparative in front of somebody and say, look, this is what I'm showing you because this is what consistently happens. And then make sure that you have a counselor that's willing to advocate for you as well. Sounds like a lot, but it's really important, because if we find yourself in the situation, I'd hate to see you be in a spot where you remove your kids, or worse, your kids removed from the home. This is really important, but it's massively important for personal advocacy. And it's way more impactful than just saying, I didn't do that. Because other than that, that's all you've got. What? Why is that positive? I didn't take any meth. Oh yeah, right. You know, and that's all the response you're going to get, because you've already got a history and you found yourself in the system because of something you did anyway. Your credibility is low. Make sure you're using the science to support yourself. And there is science that's available to you. You have a right to know your blood screens. You have a right to know the results of them all, and you should have easy access to them. Make sure you have that stuff around so you can demonstrate this if you ever find yourself in this mess. This is an easy one to do. It comes with a lot of scary measures along the line, but be prepared for these types of things. That's personal advocacy, especially if you're doing the right thing. But emotional and name calling and screaming and hollering and irate behavior, I can't believe you're treating me this way, is of no value in personal advocacy. Documentation is massively important and very useful. And in many cases, while it might frustrate somebody for making a bad call with you, and they'll probably come and try to find something else in the end anyway, if you're not being slick and you're not doing anything wrong, there's no angle they can go at you if you're following the rules. So follow the rules. Don't push the line. Find a program. Another point of advocacy is find a program that works. If you're in a program that doesn't work for you, find one that does. There's plenty of them out there. Find one that'll take you on as a client, and find one that works. In terms of legal matters, make sure that you're communicating all the time, even the hard stuff. It's key, because a lot of them like to know ahead of time. Now, some of them, it depends on your worker. There might be some that are a little nasty, and anything you share with them, they're going to use. Be careful with those. But if you've got one that seems reasonably compliant in terms of working with you, and they have not, they're not demonstrating anything that says they're out to get you, they just have to manage you because you got yourself in this mess in the first place, share with them what's going on, share with them your concerns and obstacles, and make sure communication is effective and collaborative. Make sure it's collaborative. Don't always be pressing the pace with them. Don't always be screaming in their face. Don't always be giving them books worth of information. Make sure that you're concise and action-oriented with what you're trying to get them to accomplish with the information you're sharing. Get permission when you need it. Don't just do something and ask for forgiveness later. If you're on papers, or if you are in a CPS case, asking for forgiveness later doesn't mean squat, because you knew something was going on. You made a call that could put you in the crosshairs of a problem, and the only reason that you even have to deal with it is because you got caught. You need to make sure that when you're working with these programs, that you're asking for permission first, or at least acknowledging a situation ahead of time and making sure that they at least reluctantly are alongside of you, or are cautionarily alongside of you. Mitigate your situation no matter what. If you've got a substance use issue, stay away from those areas. If you've got a treatment provider that doesn't seem to be attentive and supportive and available, get one that is. You cannot afford to be around somebody that's doing their job half-assed. You got to be with somebody that is actually supportive of you and understanding your goals and objectives and observing you based on those. And by all means, if you find a place that claims to be trauma-informed, make sure they're not actually causing further trauma in your life, just like Barrington House in Rochester, New York has done to many of their clients, including in our situation. And unfortunately, in our situation, we do document, we do take care of things, we do make sure we know our rights. And in that situation, I was able to protect my loved one and get her to a better situation. But these things I'm sharing with you are not easy. When you're emotional, make wise choices. The worst thing you can do when you're already the reason you got yourself in a mess anyway, whether you acknowledge it or not, you had a role in why you're there. We can have 10,000 reasons why it's other people's fault why we got ourselves there. You're there because for some reason you were somewhere in the vicinity. They don't just grab somebody in New York and say and pull somebody from California into a case because just by random name. You had to have somehow been involved in a circumstance that made you look bad. Stay out of bad situations. Make sure that you're not emotional with people that are around. Just make sure that you're saying, look, this is something that's problematic for me. If you're sad, say you're sad. If you're saying this makes me angry and I'm trying to deal with the situation, just say it like that. Don't demonstrate your anger. Don't demonstrate your rage and sadness, and don't do that. Show a measured response and just describe, this is something that's upsetting to me because I don't see how it can be true. versus saying, I can't believe you're doing this to me. Why are you doing this to us? We're never doing anything. Blah, blah. We're going to sue you. All that crap is definitely going to do anything wrong. Now, that may seem hypocritical with some of the videos that I've had on here, but I'm using this platform in some cases to educate you how freaking frustrating and wrong some people behave. And also at the same time, putting people on notice that you cannot get away with doing things to people because not all of us are going to lay down and let it happen. But I did it in a measured response, and I waited even to come on this show. It wasn't just off the cuff. I made sure that we were already well down the road before I started talking about it with you guys. And we have been well down the road. And by the time I proclaimed a lot of the things we're going through, we already were in a good situation relative to how to deal with it. I would say that as you go, the takeaway from me today, and what I'm hoping that you see here, and I apologize for leaving up these drug screen so long. I got so on a roll here, but if the takeaway I would have today for you is to make sure that you take your inventory and understand exactly what's going on with you. Make sure that you look at the areas where you typically compromise and don't do it anymore. I can tell you this, and I believe it to be true. If you're doing something that you could, if you got caught, you can get in trouble for, these situations are incredibly accurate with finding you and busting you on the very thing you think you're being slick for. Because we're like all people, if we're slick and get away with it once, we're going to keep pushing the line on that, especially as addicts, until we get ourselves in a situation where we get caught. Compromise, zero. Not a little, zero. Make sure you take your script exactly as it's supposed to be taken. Don't make any deviation from that at all. If you say you're going to go to group, go to group. If you say you're going to go to a counseling session, go to counseling session. If you have none of that stuff scheduled, get it scheduled. Get somebody alongside of you that can advocate for you as you go forward. Don't compromise. Advocate and document. So if you're going to advocate for yourself, but do it in a measured way. Make sure you've documented what you're saying. If you know that there's a hole in your flank, just as I described with these tests, which is an obvious one to share, it's easy to share the line on how to advocate, but document it. Get your treatment plan. Make sure that you've got a copy of your treatment plan all the time. If you're concerned about what's being put in your chart, make sure that you have your progress notes. You have a right to all that information. Make sure that you have it. Don't just trust that somebody's doing it correctly for you if you're serious. If you're just going through the motions, then it probably doesn't matter because you're going to do something stupid anyway. But if you're going through it seriously and you want to find a better days and you've got all these people with eyes on you that are just looking for you to screw up again, make sure you take the time, for God's sakes, and support your case. Be ready in advance. Don't wait till somebody comes after you and then try to save yourself. Know what you need to do. Document your own work because it's only up to you that you get better. Your sobriety is your work. It's your work. And how serious you are about it is about how serious the effort you're going to put into making sure that you stay sober. And the last thing I'll leave you with is move forward. Make sure you move forward. Don't stay in the past or the history of what somebody has done to you throughout the system. Try to shed as much burden in your mind as you can as you go through these circumstances, because there's going to be plenty more obstacles and plenty more fights and plenty more frustrations. You don't have the energy or the time to keep piling them on each other. When you do your inventory of yourself, consider the areas where you could shed burden from your mind that really isn't action-oriented at all. I've shared on videos in the past where there are circumstances where I'll sit back and 90% of my time is occupied with things that are entirely out of my control and there's nothing I can do about it. So what is the freaking point of obsessing over that? There isn't one. There isn't one, because there's plenty of work I can do. And I should be completely obsessed with the work I can do, the things I do own, the actions I must take. And in this case, as I'm demonstrating for you tonight, some of that is just making sure you have the documentation that demonstrates your good work. If nothing else, it's something you should be proud of. If you've had a season or a history or a life of addiction and now all of a sudden you're actually doing it well, why not show the paper trail that shows how well you're doing? It's encouraging. God, not for nothing, one of the greatest hopes you can have in your life is not looking over your shoulder anymore. So why not have the paperwork showing your good work, flexing a little bit? You deserve it. If you got yourself to a season of recovery, by all means, you deserve it. So give yourself a fighting chance when people aren't looking at you correctly. Or if you have a lifetime of addiction and you're known as that guy over there, well, if you're that guy over there, show them you're not. You're resurrected. You're brand new. You're reborn in your new life. You are hope to others. You're a light. You're no longer that guy. And you'll help them see that light. In our case, it seems like we become educators for the system and help them see things differently as they go through this and treat everybody the same way. And most importantly, keep yourself out of trouble. Please like and subscribe, comment, I hope this video is useful to you. Sorry I didn't take down that the shared screen quicker. I don't know. I got on a roll, and that happens. Got a little excited, but I appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I said, like and subscribe, comment. Between now and the next time we talk, I'm going to do everything I can to stay out of trouble, and I hope you do too.